Hey, thanks for tuning into the Long Great Lesson Show. It's a podcast that motivates and inspires leaders to pursue their passions and to leave a positive impact in their communities. Today, I am joined by Derek Kenmotsu. Derek graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point in 2006 and served as an infantry officer for his first assignment at Camp Casey, South Korea. This would be followed by an assignment at Joint Base Lewis McChord in the state of Washington and an overseas deployment to Iraq. Later on, Derek would eventually go on to serve in Special Forces as a detachment commander, training and advising various friendly personnel in the Pacific region. In 2015, Derek would move back to the Bay Area to pursue his MBA degree at the University of California, Berkeley, Haas School of Business. Upon completion of business school, Derek would go on to work for Apple in Cupertino, California as a global supply manager. Today, Derek is the co-founder and CEO of Team Ignite, a premier leadership development and executive coaching company based in Hanoi, Vietnam. Welcome to the Long Great Lesson Show, Derek. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. It's been a great day.
What did you do this morning?
This morning, let's see. We have a lot of things that we're trying to line up. Mm-hmm. So I'm working on our investor relations deck, so getting prepared for our fundraising round.
Gotcha.
But on top of that, we're trying to close a lot of deals. Sure. So working on our deal with getting former West Point Superintendent General Caslin out here to do a seminar, yes, with Viettel, a large telecom company in Vietnam, and also preparing our Parents Boot Camp, which we are running in June and July.
Gotcha. So there's a lot of moving pieces.
Yes.
A lot of milestones that are coming up here. I can only imagine how busy you must be.
Oh, yeah.
And you also mentioned Vietnam.
Yes.
So we are in Vietnam right now.
We are here in Hanoi.
And how long did you move to Vietnam?
So I got out here at the end of February, so pretty recent, about 3 months ago.
Gotcha.
And yeah, I've been hit the ground running. I landed about 10 p.m. And the next morning, we were meeting with Vin Group, one of the large conglomerates here. Pretty much about 9 hours, 10 hours after I landed, we were already standing in front of them proposing some of our services.
That's incredible. Yeah. You weren't jet lagged at all, or how
I
did you feel?
Was jet lagging pretty hard, but my experience, both military and also working in operations, manufacturing, I was constantly traveling back and forth between the States and Asia, so that gave me a little bit of, I think, experience or grit towards it.
Absolutely.
But, yeah.
No, so that's something that we definitely want to delve into today's episode.
Yeah.
So you have the military background, yes. West Point graduate. When did you graduate from West Point again?
I graduated in 2006.
2006.
Yes.
Okay, so 13 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess if we rewind a little bit more, where are you originally from?
I am originally from Foster City, California, which is a suburb of San Francisco. Born and raised, same house, all the way 18 years until I shipped out to West Point.
That's amazing.
So yeah, I am a California Bay Area guy through and through.
Okay. And so in California, how did you hear about West Point? That's on the other side of the country.
Exactly. So I think I first heard about it when I was a fifth grader. I was looking at a map, and for some reason this map of the United States had West Point.
Yeah.
And then I asked my fifth grade teacher, what is West Point? Because you see New York City, you might see Albany because it's the capital. And then she said, well, West Point is a place where some of the best leaders in our history trained to become military officers. I was like, oh, okay. And then that was just, for some reason, burned in the back of my mind. Right. Never touched it through, pretty much through middle school. And then in high school, there were cadets that came out for the hometown recruiting. Sure. And I was a sophomore, and I had just gotten involved with student government. And I heard about this opportunity to meet a West Point cadet. And Ken Yambing is his name. He's an 04 guy.
Oh, you remember his name?
I remember his name, yeah.
Wow.
And I guess he was a yearling, and he gave the spiel of what West Point was all about. I was really impressed. Yes. Took that, went to my congressman's office, Tom Lantos, the late, great Tom Lantos, and his assistant kind of ran me through the process. And from there, they really helped me get through all of the gates and got me prepared, and kind of the rest is history. I just kind of really just pushed forward, and that was my number one dream at the time. Yes. Dream school was to get into West Point.
Was there any military, like, prior service in your family at all?
Yes, but my dad didn't really have as much exposure to West Point. He was enlisted. So my dad was enlisted from 1962 to 65. So way before I was born. And so it was kind of a distant thing. I knew that he served in Korea, and I knew that he served in the 1st Air Assault Unit. You know how there's air assault, like airborne air assault in parentheses, airborne parentheses, there was air assault test, 11th Air Assault Test. So he was in the test unit that was based out of Fort Benning that was eventually reflagged to the 1st Cav Division, which, you know, that Idrang Valley, we were soldiers once and young, Colonel Hal Moore. Sure. That was his unit before they became, I guess, transitioned to combat unit going forward. So he trained actually in Camp McCall, where I went through the Q course.
Oh my goodness.
I didn't know any, I mean, he didn't bring up the name until like I'm there in the Q course, you know, 40 plus years later. Wow. So he had so many cross paths, like he didn't talk about these things until I actually got in. So he was actually in Camp Hovey in Korea, and I was at Camp Casey, which is one and of the same. Right. So 40 years later, he came out there, and he showed me all the areas where he lived, and I mean, it transformed. He kept on pointing out, that wasn't here, that wasn't there. I was like, Dad, you're there like 10 years after the war.
Oh my goodness. Wow. So it all like comes full circle.
So it kind of came full circle, but it wasn't something where it was like, he was telling me, you need to go to West Point, you need to go to West Point. It just kind of organically through my life's journey transpired.
Wow. And so you end up at West Point, you're at Beast, like any moments of hesitation or like, what did I get myself into? Or you're like, I'm ready?
I think at that day 1, day 0 or whatever, I think we all had that moment like, where am I? What did I do? But I never had this moment of like, I don't want to do this. It was always like, this is what I want to do, but like, you're just feeling like excitement, but pressure and uncertainty, and just, I think your life is just constantly like, you're in this like pressure cooker and just trying to figure out, like, make sense of it. Right. So I think we were all kind of had those moments where we were like, whoa, what am I doing? But I'm excited. I just want to do well. I think that fear, the fear of Beast Bears is like, you don't want to fail. And you have this feeling, you know, everything you're doing, you're being told that you're doing it wrong.
Absolutely. Psychological game.
Your salute's wrong, step up to the line, you know, and you're just, you know, bumbling all over yourself. Right. But I think it's just that fear of failure that gets a lot of people nervous, but then you get through it, you drive on.
Do you think that mindset of wanting to just continue to achieve, kind of constantly like failing, but you're learning as you go, is that a constant trend in your 4 years at West Point?
Yeah, I think, you know, when we're at West Point, we are constantly being tested. And I think we start to get used to being able to manage that. So being able to manage the stress of it. And I think also being able to bounce back. So you have a setback, maybe you don't do well on a test, or maybe something, you just have a bad day. But then I think we've all been there, and then we all kind of somehow figure out a way to bounce back. And then that comes again in, you know, BOLIC or, you know, OBC, again in Ranger School again. And I don't know what it is I remember coming out of Ranger School thinking, I never want to do anything like that again.
Yes.
And then here I am sitting in selection. I'm like, how am I here again? I guess we just keep getting the itch. But and I think the foundation is there, started at Beast, started at West Point. I think we get instilled like that type of resilience. And I think that's really one of the intangibles, one of the valuable things that West Point produces, that I think it's really hard to find anywhere else.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I guess that's why it's considered one of the premier leadership institutions in the world.
Right.
To be able to produce those kind of leaders.
Exactly.
So how was your West Point experience overall?
I think it was great. I think hindsight, we always look at the positive things, but overall, I mean, I couldn't imagine life without that experience. The relationships that you make there are lifelong. And I guess we had the fortunate aspect of, we all go into, or by and large, we all go into the Army with so many of our classmates. And we have so many different touch points. For example, my roommate, Mike Conway, he was my groomsman in my wedding a couple weeks back. We graduated, of course, together, and then he went engineering, and then full circle, we went to the Q course together. And we're sitting in small unit tactics in the same platoon. He's one squad away.
Wow.
And we're like, wow.
Small
and then,
army,
yeah,
right?
and then we're in the same class, so we go through the same officer course together. So, yeah, just constantly having the opportunity to help each other out through life. And now here I am in Vietnam with my classmate Danny Huang.
Yes.
And, I never would have expected to be working with him 13, almost 14 years later, starting a company in Vietnam.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So I guess that's also a thing that I've noticed in the military is that the bonds that you form are very strong, just because naturally our profession, we go through a lot of similar hardships, shared experiences. West Point, sure, Ranger School,
Yes.
SFAS,
Yes.
and that transcends a lot of different boundaries, no matter where you are
Absolutely.
in time.
Absolutely.
You just call them up and kind of have like that similar background. So that's phenomenal.
Yeah, people always ask me about, business school. Like, it's great you did it. You go there, and the main thing that you get out of it is a network, and it's true. I think in the Berkeley Haas, the network is really strong. It's great, but when I talk to our veteran friends and our West Point friends that have gone to business school, various business schools across, some of the best ones, across the board. And I think the feedback is always the same. It's like, it's a great network. However, I don't know if it compares to that military network or that West Point network. It's one of those things where people will always respond. People will always be receptive to what you have to say. And I think that's really rare, and I think it's really valuable.
Incredible.
And then one thing is we don't go there thinking that. Like, I heard it, and it didn't really mean much to me in high school. Like, people saying, oh, it's a great network. And I was like, all right, great network, but I don't really know what that means. At that time, at that age, you're 17 or 18 years old. But now, when you do transition from the military, and which can be daunting because the military is such an established path, you can really know what you'll be doing maybe 15, 20 years from the start of your career, to a point where they always say the world is your oyster, but it's a gift and a curse. I mean, well, what do I do? And that's the thing. But that network is there to help guide you, to give you a take on their experience.
Wow. So, I mean, it seems like you've done so much up to this point. What did you study at West Point, and did that predict where you're at right now, actually?
Actually, I was actually thinking about that. I'd say yes. So I studied international relations, and primarily because I was always very interested in world events, current affairs, and being a post 9/11 service member, you're going to deploy somewhere.
Sure.
So I wanted to have that understanding of the world so that I could explain to my soldiers why we are doing what we're doing, or if they can make sense of the policies. And I thought that it really benefited me both in the military, and I think everything just kind of like snowball effect. And then I went SF because I was very interested in geopolitics. I was very interested in East Asia, so I went to First Group and focused in Asia. I did a lot of my missions in the Philippines. I did some missions in Nepal. And I think just my foundation of international relations helped me explain to my soldiers of like, why Nepal?
Yeah.
And it's like, why U.S. and Nepal? And it sits between two rising powers in the world, China and India. So when I explained that to my soldiers, it made sense. And here I am in Vietnam. I try to, kind of when I'm reflecting, how did I end up in Vietnam? It was that whole experience of being in SF, enjoying working with our foreign partners. One of my missions in the Philippines was developing their kind of training infrastructure. So I advised their Special Operations Command, and one thing that we did was establish an urban warfare school and make their Special Operations medical school, training a little bit more robust. So that was really rewarding for me working there. So that's kind of when this opportunity presented itself. It excited me, and two, it kind of made sense. I felt like it's kind of like the culmination of all of my experiences of doing my undergrad in international relations, my MBA, and now I'm kind of applying a little bit of both, working for me in a foreign country and applying and training and teaching things that I learned in business school.
That's very impressive. And that's actually hard to foresee when you're maybe a high school student or a West Point cadet, or maybe even like a young officer, to know where your life is going to be at.
Right, and that's one thing that if any cadets are tuning in, or even high schoolers are tuning in, I would say, always kind of like check in with like how you're feeling, what your interests are. But even if you don't know exactly what you're going to do 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, that's okay. Just keep exploring. And that's kind of what I did. When I started West Point, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to branch. When people ask me, because they always will, they'll say, what do you want to do after the Army? And I always initially said military intelligence, without really knowing what military intelligence was. Sure. And then eventually it evolved to infantry. So that's what I did right after. And it was primarily because of the experiences that West Point offered me to get a flavor of each of the branches. And also my peers, the peers that I gravitated towards also went infantry. So that kind of made sense to me. And same with Special Forces. Special Forces didn't really become something that I was really in my mind realistic about until I was a first lieutenant. It wasn't, there's those individuals that they go to selection when I guess they did offer it, or if they do offer it at West Point. I wasn't one of them, because I always thought that, I don't know if I could carry a 100-pound rucksack. That's not me. Like, I remember struggling with a 45-pound rucksack, so why would I even, entertain that idea? But then, eventually, my experiences led me there.
That's very interesting. So, keeping your options open, explore,
yes,
network,
absolutely,
and I guess do your due diligence.
Absolutely.
Okay. How did you plan a career in the military at all, or were you kind of just going
back to keeping the options open?
Sure.
I kept my mind open to having a career in the military. And then as I learned more about the different paths, I had these ideas of what might I want to do. So when I was infantry, right then it was infantry, trying to stick with it all the way up to try to become a general. And then SF presented itself, and then weighed the options. Some people that went through that path or were educated or informed about it told me that, well, if you want to be a general, if that's your primary goal, SF might not be the best option. Not to say that you can't become a general, but that pyramid becomes much more steep. There's a lot less commands. So they explained that to me. You're doing it for the experience of being an SF officer, being a team leader. You're not doing it to try to get that, star command. So then I took that, I weighed the options, and then decided to go SF. When I was an SF officer, then now it's like, okay, my commitment's coming up. Do I stay SF, try to go the command path? Do I do functional area? Foreign area officer was very, very attractive to me. Or do I try to go to another selection, special missions unit? Or do I get off of active duty and pursue something else? So all those options you get to these forks in the road, and again, you talk to your network, you talk to your mentors, you talk to your peers, and then you make an informed decision based on it. And that's kind of how I am here today.
What was your deciding factor from transitioning out of SF to go to business school?
Yeah, so I always tell this comparison. So I played football in high school, here in Hanoi, I have to say American football because people might think that I'm play soccer. So defensive back in football. Played a little bit at sprint football at West Point.
Nice.
And so I use this metaphor comparison. I love playing football, but not great for your body. And being in Special Forces, being a team leader was like being on a football team. I loved it. It was just awesome, being on the ground, with the guys, your ground force commander if you're deployed into a place. And I loved it. And the only way for me to continue on with that experience was to go to another selection. After you get promoted, you're off the team. You'll eventually come back around as a commander, and be, pretty close and still be a very rewarding experience. But I saw that as being a pretty short time to come back and be a commander, because at the time, or maybe still, it was a 1-year command, just to get all of the majors that command time. So I was thinking, do I want to commit to that?
Yeah.
And then spend a lot of time on staff, which is very important and rewarding in its own right, but wasn't as attractive to me as being a team leader. So going back to the football comparison, I can't go back to playing high school football. As much as I loved it, I can't go back to doing that for obvious reasons. And being a Special Forces team leader, I couldn't go back to doing that. I know that there are some officers very committed that they decommission they give up their officer commission for maybe a warrant or something, which is an option, but it wasn't an option that I wanted to pursue. So that's where I kind of made the decision, well, I kind of want to do something where I could be on the ground, have this flexibility to build and lead a team. So that's kind of what drove me towards eventually entrepreneurship.
Gotcha.
And has brought me here.
That's in its own, that's in its own atmosphere and environment in itself.
Right.
And challenges and complexities.
Yes.
Very similar to the military.
Right.
So why did you decide to pursue business school?
So business school, I think, for me was fairly broad. I think two of the options that many military officers pursue are business school or law school, or maybe like MPA, like public administration, policy, if maybe more of a government focus. So for me, I was kind of curious and interested in pursuing technology, at least the tech industry. This is 2000, what was it? I guess 15, where I'm thinking about it. This is when kind of like the second wave of the tech industry is starting to rise, the Ubers and the Airbnbs and all these companies out there. And I thought that the path for me would be through business.
Gotcha. So how was that transition?
It was it was tough. Yeah. I would say, for me, since I did the business school path, it was trying to get my application attractive, get back into doing math again.
Right.
So I would say it wasn't easy, but the great thing is there are many that paved the path not too long before me. So I even had classmates that had done it, because I got out, or I transitioned about 9 years after active duty. So those that did the 5 and fly, some were, well done with business school, already on their second careers, or well into their first post-military careers. So had lots of coffee chats, lots of Skype chats.
Nice.
So that made it much easier, I would say, but it was still pretty daunting to take on the GMAT and then get all the essays in order. And yeah.
So you said 9 years.
Yes.
4 more years after the
Yes.
PLD 5 and fly.
5, yes.
And so, did you ever feel like it's too late? I'm in too far.
I did have that concern, because just human nature, we think of like halfway is like, you might as well finish it.
Like over the hump, right?
Yeah, over the hump, you might as well finish it. But I think that's just a very personal decision. So I think it just really depends on what you want to do in your career. So I know of people that have done that switch over after the 10. Some people say, well, you're so close, but then if they have an opportunity to present themselves, it doesn't matter how close it is. That opportunity is the opportunity at that moment in time. So for me, I thought that doing 9 was fine, because I think we just reason with our decisions, but I wanted to go SF. I knew I wanted to do that, so at a minimum that would have been 8. So, and at the point in time I went to the Q course, I was at the 6-year mark, so that pretty much brought me out to 9. So I thought that those experiences were very valuable, kind of made me who I am today. So I think that 9 was the right amount for me.
Wow, and that's gonna be different for everyone.
Exactly.
And then there will be opportunities that are missed, but there will also be opportunities later down the line as well.
Exactly, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm sure a lot of us are thinking the same thing. Is like, we're all getting that FOMO, fear of missing out on certain things.
Exactly, yeah.
But we also want to pursue a certain milestone in the military within our career. And so at what point do we make the decision? But it's individually based.
Exactly, and I think that's why it's very important for individuals that are considering this to fairly early on talk to others, try to gain as many insights as possible.
Absolutely.
To help make an informed decision.
Again, continue exploring.
Right.
Due diligence and the networking. So that's going to be a common trend.
Yes.
At every single pivot point.
Right.
Where did you end up going to business school?
So I went to UC Berkeley.
Berkeley
Haas, yes.
And where did you transition next out of B school?
So I did my internship at Apple, which is a 3-month summer internship. I actually worked for a West Pointer. I think he's a 91 grad.
Did you know he was a West Pointer before?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay,
So,
nice.
Again, back to that network. I reached out to him on LinkedIn, cold called. I looked at his LinkedIn and it said Berkeley, Haas, West Point. I was like, score. Yeah, that's great. So I just had a coffee chat, and then I still went through the process. I did the interview day, but I didn't interview with him on that day. And he's the one that I ended up with. He reached out to me and said, hey, I didn't end up with an intern through this whole super day. Are you still open? I said, yes, I am. When do you want me to start? So that's kind of how it worked out. His name's Nim Wen. And he had really mentored me, kind of explained. He'd been there for, I think, close to 7 or 8 years, which is a long time for Apple. And it was really great to work for him. He definitely threw me into the deep end. I started on a Monday. That Sunday after, I was on a plane to China to sit in front of a Korean and Japanese company to guide our manufacturing process.
Wow.
So it was a really quick turnaround, but
how was your time at Apple? What did you end up doing there?
So I did 2 different things. My internship, I was a program manager. Okay. So my project, and I was actually lucky. I didn't have like a side project. I was pretty much put to work, basically filling gaps that this team needed. So there was a new factory that needed to be brought up for one of their displays, for one of their phones at the time. And I basically had to take it from, they had just gotten the machines and take it all the way through their prototyping phase. So managing their schedule, making it more efficient because it was an accelerated schedule. Sure. So I just had to figure out ways to wade through like the language barriers in the factory because you had Korean, Chinese, and Japanese being spoken, and just make them more efficient.
I mean, what experience did you have to rely on in order to get through this new challenge?
Basically be flexible and be a fast learner, because I wasn't a mechanical engineer. I wasn't, I did a system sequence, so maybe a little bit of that systems efficiency focus might have helped me, but I mean, that basically was all foundational and being kind of like a self-starter.
Wow.
And then utilizing and leveraging the just cross-functional roles. So my manager gave me a list of people that I should talk to, said, hey, 30 minutes each person, talk to them, learn how you make an LCD display, and go out there and do it. And when I was out there, I had a bunch of, they call them advanced display module engineers who are, really, really specialized, really brilliant. And they explained to me, walked me through the entire process of what I need to know, where the high risk areas of the factory were, and figure out how to accomplish what the kind of mission set was, which was to get X amount of products out the door in this amount of time.
You think business school helped you out with that at all?
I remember telling some of my peers when we were talking about our internships, I'd say that actually the Army experience helped me more. Wow. The business school experience helped me more in my second role. So that was being a global supply manager. So what that is you're responsible for the end-to-end of a certain product. So my product was the Apple leather phone case. And the main responsibility for a global supply manager is the commercial side of that. So negotiating the cost of building that product. So there's a lot of negotiation there and a little bit more Excel work than the program manager role, which was much more schedule and process efficiency driven. Yeah.
Very interesting.
So I'd say both of my experience, kind of like right now, both of my experiences help support me to accomplish those roles.
That's actually very reassuring as well, because I think another thing that a lot of us, when I say us, maybe veterans or military personnel that are currently serving is like, how do I apply my experiences on the outside? Right. How do I make my skills translatable and relevant and applicable to what I'm doing on the other side?
Yes.
And this is a true testament to that it works out.
Yeah, I would say that there's definitely a lot of it's foundational, and there's a lot of figuring it out on the job and in school. So I would say it's a mixture. It's a mixture of you will have a lot of tools, but then at the same time, I think those tools, part of it is to be a lifelong learner and to be able to pick up some new skills along the way.
So that brings us to today.
Yes.
You recently came out here. How did you hear about where you're currently working?
So the way I heard about, Danny is the one that, Danny Huang brought me in terms of his idea of coming to Vietnam. So while he was working in China is when we crossed paths again. And initially the idea was, hey, come out to China, let's start a business together. And at the time I was still doing my internship, so it was a little too early for me to commit to anything because I still had to finish school. And eventually that evolved to, hey, I think there's opportunity in Vietnam. I was like, oh, that's interesting. What do you think? Yeah. And so he was always in K-12 education. And then when he came out here, the idea was, well, people are also asking about, can we apply some of the things that we're learning in terms of character-focused education, leadership skills to adults, to corporations, to university students. And I thought, that's interesting. I did a flavor of that when I was in Special Forces, and I kind of really enjoyed the peer leadership aspect of my MBA experience. I did some student government activities there, so I thought, hey, this sounds fascinating. Let's give it a shot.
I mean, was there any uncertainty of, one, leaving your current job at the time, which was Apple?
Yes.
And then picking up everything and moving across the world?
Oh, absolutely. A ton of uncertainty. Still uncertainty, and I think risk it could be viewed in different ways. So there's the risk of you have this great stable job. Like I was at Apple when it crossed the $1 trillion market cap threshold. $1 trillion company. Why would you ever leave?
It's crazy, yeah.
And I was thinking, I actually talked to a classmate today, and he's kind of in a position that I was, but he's been in this role for a while, a director role, senior role, doing very well. But he wanted to call me because he said, hey, you took the plunge. Like, what made you do it? Like, how do you feel? What are your thoughts on it? So I gave him my thoughts, and what I told him was, I loved my job at Apple. I loved my team. So that's kind of rare to have that in a really hard charging, pressure-filled environment where you have a good culture on your team. So it was good. I would say it was great. But when I really looked at kind of the outlook of if I had stayed, of course maybe it was more linear focus in terms of my perception. But I was looking at what my manager did, what my manager's manager and my director were doing, and if I stayed, what would that look like, and when would I basically be in their role? And I didn't really want to stick in that role I didn't see myself staying in that role for 6, 10, 20 years from now. And I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And this just seemed like an exciting opportunity. And part of this also, of course, my wife. My wife is very adventurous, and she was also interested in moving out to Southeast Asia as well. So for her, it's a big career change too. Absolutely. So we're kind of taking on this challenge and adventure together. Yeah.
And she's supportive because she's adventurous. She's
very supportive.
Very nice.
And I think because she has a global experience of work, she started her post-business school career in Singapore. So that has helped. She's had a global perspective of growing up in Korea, Thailand, the US, and Canada. So all of that kind of, I think, has helped make her feel comfortable. Whereas I think most people will be like, you're going to up and move from a stable, good corporate job in California, your hometown, to Vietnam, and you never lived there, you don't speak the language.
What is your advice to those that maybe are there right where you're at and are afraid to take the next step?
I would say just because you're in like a stable role, kind of take inventory of what your passion and what you're really interested in. And don't be afraid to take the plunge, because just because you leave that role doesn't mean you can't go back to either that or something similar to it or something better. I would say that many times we hold on to things because there's a level of fear. I would say make informed decisions. I would say don't be reckless. Right. But at the same time, the risks might not be as large as you think, because especially if we're talking about our fellow alumni, I mean, there's that network that we have, and you're probably pretty successful in your own right. So if there is an opportunity that is attractive and has that potential benefit of a lot to gain, a lot to learn, I would say try to consider taking that step. I would say that step is probably the hardest, and then once you're there, you'll figure it out.
I love it.
Yeah.
One last question before we close this out.
Yes.
What is your definition of success? And do you feel like you have achieved it?
Are we talking in life? Or are we talking...
I guess whether it's business, life philosophy, or your own personal success, however you want to define it.
I think I'm going to go personal.
Okay.
And so I have this fear of saying, like, if I've already defined success, then the rest is like, oh, I don't need to keep pushing. But like, so I would say I define success as, I think, being happy and content. And where I see that is doing something meaningful. So I would say that through my life, I've been very fortunate to be in positions where I've felt like I've done meaningful things, and I've had the opportunity to build really strong relationships and friendships. So that's, I think, what has made me happy and smiley throughout my life. So I would say right now I am successful. That said, I want to continue to bring meaning to my life and others. And I see that by providing, I think, impact right at this moment. Right now, it's here in Vietnam. But so whether that be providing jobs, whether that is providing education and support to companies that are trying to figure things out, I think that's what brings me fulfillment. So right now, I feel like I am on a successful path. We'll say that. Again, it's always, I think, it's a journey, and I think that we're always, on that path. So I think I'm fairly content right now, but I want to continue on that path.
Awesome. That's a phenomenal response, and really just want to thank you for your time, for being on the show.
Thank you.
Last but not least, where can the viewers and listeners learn more about you, if you would like?
Yeah, so you could reach me on LinkedIn, Derek Kenmotsu. I think I'm the only one in the world, I'm pretty sure.
Wow.
At least right now. So pretty easy to find. So LinkedIn's probably the best way.
And the company?
And the company, yes, Ignite, so teamignite.com, or on Facebook or LinkedIn, you could find us as well.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Derek.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure having you on the show.
Likewise.